Real quick, before we get into the show, I wanted to share a new service called Getita that Ken and I have been using that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you?
If we buy a bunch of open and click signals from the broader email ecosystem, and we make sure before we give our customer an email address that they've opened and clicked in like the last 7 to 14 days, depending on what the other characteristics of the email address are, that really works for deliverability. E-commerce is like bread and butter. Shopify Plus in particular, so like the 14,000 Shopify stores at the top of the 4.5 million Shopify world, like it works for like 95% of those guys.
Welcome everyone to the Firing the Man podcast, a show for anyone who wants to be their own boss. If you sit in a cubicle every day and know you are capable of more, then join us. This show will help you build a business and grow your passive income streams in just a few short hours per day. And now your hosts, serial entrepreneurs David Schomer and Ken Wilson.
Welcome everyone to the Firing the Man podcast. On today's episode, we have the privilege to interview Adam Robinson. Adam is the founder and CEO of retention.com, which he's bootstrapped into 14 million ARR in 2.5 years with 6 people. Retention.com is an identity resolution service that has the ability to identify 1/3 of your anonymous website traffic so you can market to those potential customers. Yes, you read that sentence again. It's magical. Prior to Retention, Adam was the founder and CEO of Robley Email Marketing, which was bootstrapped, and he exited for 8 figures to a private equity company in 2020. We are really excited to share Adam's story and knowledge with the listeners today and dig in on everything email. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. So first things first, tell us a little bit of background on your life story and experiences and prior jobs and what led you to founding retention.com.
Stop working for the man.
That's right.
Awesome. I once worked for the man. I graduated college in 2003. I went to New York because you can make the most money if you got a job in an investment bank. I didn't even really know what that meant. But I still had good grades, so I could get a job. Worked at Lehman Brothers, and I made my way to the credit default swap trading desk. And I was there from 2003 through the financial crisis when they went bankrupt. Joined Barclays, who bought them afterwards, and did that for like 8 or 9 years. They made a movie about that job. It's called The Big Short. It was literally that. It's what I did, which was crazy and fun to watch. Some of the guys I worked with like characters in the movie. And, I got to New York, and these guys who were my first roommates were starting this website called Vimeo in my apartment. And I watched that thing happen. And, the whole time I was doing that trading job, and my brother was also an entrepreneur. He had like a low tech business that he like used the internet for and did really well. And, I was just watching these two different people that I was, or two different sort of pockets of people that I was close to. And they appeared to be getting a deeper satisfaction out of what they were doing than just sort of, showing up at the casino every day in your suit and tie. So, and then I had this great mentor too. So the interesting thing about the job that I have is like, it was this weird thing where it's a bunch of 25-year-olds, they gave these credit default swap books to these young kids because there was no action in them. And then all of a sudden, they became the center of the universe when the world exploded because it was default insurance. Everybody like had to have it. And then it kind of went back to being super boring after the financial crisis. And with all these regulations and stuff, just the market was shrinking like crazy. And, I had kind of saved enough money to be like, I don't really want to do this anymore. I want to go try to be an entrepreneur, whatever that meant, right? And I sort of agreed with this Jeff Bezos quote that like we're in the first inning of the internet. Like, he's got the whole, it's still day one or whatever. Like, and I still think that it's just, there's no question to me that, building software and working in the internet will like keep me employed if my skills are good forever for as long as I'm living, Maybe the robots take it away at some point, but like, I'm hoping that I'm building the robots, right? Like, that's sort of my attitude. It's like, this is the game I want to be playing. So it was a horribly long and winding road, this really silly idea when I started that I would like kind of invest I would invest chunks of money in things and sort of be involved at like a high level in a lot of different enterprises. And, I had no experience, no filter, but like super high level of confidence in myself. And I picked 5 things that I was stupidly going to sort of chaperone with no experience. I mean, it just doesn't even make sense when I say it, like it's just totally the opposite of what I think now, and then like somehow, like by the grace of God, this email service provider called Robly, which you mentioned, happened to work. And the only reason it worked, the genesis of that story was my brother, for his business, was using this app for customer reviews on his website in email marketing. And the dude who started it, like, raised $25 million of venture and shut it. It's just something happened. He walked out. They shut the whole thing down in a day. And they're like, download all your data, switch to Mailchimp, like this thing's going away. My brother was like, this is a really novel, interesting combination of products. This guy spent a lot of money acquiring customers. Let's like build it for cheap in India and then go see if we can find his customers. So I was like, okay, that's 1 of 5 things I'm doing now, like, let's do that. And, it was just the whole got the software built. And then like, finally, like this guy I still work with, Tate, who's like my CTO, is a Stanford comp sci guy, an all-American swimmer, like rebuilt the thing and like entirely. Like, he's just like, this is unusable. Like, if you want me to work with you, I'm starting over. I mean, a series of, so like, from the text that I got from my brother that we should do this to when we launched our product, it was almost 2 years. To give you an idea with our current product, from when I made the first wireframe, so I'm skipping a lot here, but like that. So the interesting thing about the first company was the actual founder of the company. I read a bunch of books on content marketing. I was like, oh, if you just make a YouTube video, you'll get thousands of customers for your SaaS app, because that's what these blog posts tell me. And so like, I'm making these videos and I'm like, well, so this guy sees one of them, the founder of the other company. He's like, come to Boston. If you do what you're going to try to do, it's not going to work. I can show you how to, at the very least, get like a very nice cash flow business out of this. He's like, I found something. I found it too late. I raised way too much money. I never got my revenues above my expenses. That's why the whole thing blew up. So he comes to Boston and he's like, I'm not going to tell you too much. My partner's trying to start a data company, but like, there is an email marketing company down the road that is leaving an unbelievable amount of customer information all over the internet, and they don't know it. And he's like, you can find that information and you can build a little call center and you can get thousands of people to pay you for the software if you just do it. So I was like, oh, well, that's cool. And, it worked. Like it was also brutal. Spent every penny I had getting it sort of this cash flow positive thing. And while I will not say the name of the company that we were poaching customers from in Boston, that is an email marketing company and not Mailchimp, that's a hard market. Like, it's so mature and there's so many vendors who are selling the same thing. And there's just like a few dominant brands, so we had this. It was a finite opportunity of information you could pull off of the internet and pull customers over. It wasn't infinite, right? There's only so many people willing to do that. And like, the nature of the customer base was like baby boomer, non-e-commerce, sending newsletters to their flower shop once a week, didn't care about features, didn't care about tech. Like, it was just a really hard customer to build for. There was good things that came from it, because you had to make the software incredibly, keep it simple, stupid, but like, it was just a tough thing. When we got to the end of this lead acquisition or lead sort of bringing over 5,000 customers or whatever we got, we were sitting there with a product that wasn't really competitive on its own right. It was only competitive because we had this phenomenal channel to get our first batch of customers. So, the next 3 years, I had this moment where I was like, okay, we did the sales thing. I think I need to do digital marketing, right? We have this SaaS app. It's low cost. Marketing makes sense. So I started taking digitalmarketer.com classes left, right, and center. And I remember very vividly over Thanksgiving in 2016, there was this yellow card that was the statement of value card. And it was so simple. It was just like blank helps blank buy blank. And I could not say a single thing about my company that would make somebody use it and not Mailchimp. So I was like, oh shit. Forget marketing. But luckily it's like a subscription business. It was like a nice cash machine. It was like, I had a great lifestyle for a single guy. It's like the perfect polarizing situation. Cause at the moment it was amazing, but it wasn't growing. So it's dying. Definitely had to come up with something else. So for the next 3 years, I tried to figure out what I could do that Mailchimp was not doing. Right. Because that made sense to me. It's like, well, they're doing all this stuff. Surely there are things that they are not doing. And I made a slew of horrible mistakes in analyzing market opportunity, basically 2 years in a row, big ones. Found this girl who, first I got convinced to take over the partner program by a guy who was running the partner program at the company that we were poaching customers from. And I thought it was novel. It was this boots on the ground operation selling software that Mailchimp for sure wasn't doing. And his impression was that the unit economics were fine to do it, which, I ended up spending, $100,000 over 3 months and getting sued. And I finally realized that this was totally not positive unit economics. It was like a branding exercise for them, just getting people out there in that audience and butts in seats, paying people. So, and then I found this girl who, she's like, well, there's an opportunity right above Mailchimp, which tried to build a whole other software to serve it. And it was just a whole mess. Anyway, finally came across this identity thing and I heard about it and I literally just heard about it. And I was like, what are you talking? What? There is the ability in the world to identify someone who hits somebody's website and get an email address and then give it to that person. I'm like, why is no one selling this? I know with our customers, I could sell it to every single one of them. And by the way, I thought it was not CAN spam compliant when I heard about it. And I was like, I could still sell that to every single one of our customers. They wouldn't give a shit. They would say, you know what I mean? Because if you look at the lawsuits that have actually happened as a result of CAN spam, A, the penalties are not high, and B, it's people who are being very spammy, right? So my whole thing was surely people will want to buy these emails, even if it's not sort of kosher, because there's a world of people renting and buying lists out there. Lo and behold, I realized it is actually CAN spam compliant in the US, which was amazing. My assumption the entire time is that the open rates would suck. Somehow, we came up with this process to make the engagement of these emails better than people's house lists, which is just mind boggling, So anyway, fast forward, we had this ESP, this email marketing app. It took me 1.5 years to figure out how to actually do the identity thing. And I'm like, this is going to be how we differentiate in the email space. The big email players literally can't do this because they're in this self-regulatory deliverability organization called MOG that prohibits them from selling data. If they want to be in this organization where they can pick up the phone and call someone at Hotmail, if they have a problem, they can't sell data. So I'm like, this is the perfect feature. It's going to be a killer feature in the email marketing space. It's going to differentiate us versus everybody else. So created the feature. People were signing up for our email marketing app, using the identity thing, downloading the file, putting it in Klaviyo or Drip or whatever, and then giving us a 10 out of 10 on the NPS score. Which at that point, I'm like, okay, this is a really good indicator that this is not a good feature to try to get people to switch ESPs because they don't want to do it. And our feature set kind of is behind versus everybody else. This would be an incredible thing if we spun it out, connected it to literally everything, and made it really easy to get up and going on. So that was Get Emails in January of 2020. And that's all that it was until, kind of like 4 months ago. It's this amazing, like that name, Get Emails. It's just so direct. Like I originally thought we were going to sell to affiliate marketers because I was under the impression that this was not CAN-SPAM compliant. Like even having owned an ESP for like 5 years, turns out e-commerce is like bread and butter. Shopify Plus in particular. So like the 14,000 Shopify stores at the top of the 4.5 million Shopify world, like it works for like 95% of those guys. And I think the reason why is it's a function of, we can't resolve traffic unless you have traffic. If you don't have a profitable email program, then paying any price for a lead it's going to be worse for you, But if both of those things are really strong to start with, this is just like maybe not as high as intent as an opt-in, but the engagement is so good and the price is so low and the deliverability is so high that if you just steadily pour this stuff in over time, it works unbelievably well if all that other stuff's going on. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the medium length story of why we're talking right now.
That's awesome. So,
sorry to interrupt the episode. You may have heard Ken and I talking recently about a new tool that we're using for Amazon refunds. Now, I have used other refund tools like this. However, I can tell you in the first 7 days, they scrubbed the back end of my Amazon account going back 18 months and found $5,000 of refunds. And the nice thing about this is it's my money. Amazon made a mistake and they are just auditing my account. The other thing I really like about this tool is there is no monthly fee. They only charge a commission if they are successful in getting you your money. Go to Getida.com, Getida, and enter promo code FTM for Firing the Man, FTM400. This is an awesome tool. Can't say enough good things about it. Now, back to the episode.
a couple things I want to circle back on before we dig into email. So Adam, incredible story. You've got a ton of experience. I think David would agree with me. The Big Short, probably one of my top 5 movies of all time. And so before we dig into like emails, to me, that's kind of a crazy period right there. A couple things about your story. You said you had 5 different projects going on. In my mind, it's kind of like having fishing poles in. You're just kind of fishing for what's working. And one of them worked. That's like entrepreneurship, right? And the other piece that really stood out to me is that, you said you had a really high confidence level. And I think you have to have that or you don't go all in, right? You're sitting around.
Have you guys seen I saw one of my buddies who's also an entrepreneur post this years ago on Twitter. So it's like the x-axis is time in years and the y-axis is level of confidence in your entrepreneurial abilities. And it like starts high and it drops straight down. And then it's this like slow build over like 20 years, which that is exactly it. It's like you have no idea how lost you are until you're so far in it. And then it's like, oh my God. And then finally now, 10 years later, like I don't want to jinx myself, but like, I think I kind of know how to do this. Like, I think I could start another one and it would probably work,
Yes. Yeah. That's interesting. I think like, you come into it, like you said, the axis that you come into it and you're like hard charging and so fired up and then you get your ass beat and knocked down and you slowly start learning over time. And so it makes sense. So one quick thing before we dig into more emails, do you have from that crazy period of The Big Short, do you have one story? You were surrounded by a lot of madness for probably about 5 years. Is there one story that stands out to you that the audience would like, if you can share it, if not. So
yeah, I mean, there's just so many, just as and it's not really like this anymore, but like so this like could have been in a movie. So seat that I was in, it was like, we were what was called market makers. And like it was like store, like a hedge fund would show up and they would say, make me a price and like whatever swap contract for whatever. So, and you'd say like, I'm, 100, 105 and I'll buy, right? So like you're the store and you're managing this inventory of stuff. So they were our customers, but we had these interdealer brokers that when you needed to lay off risk, you would like trade with someone at Goldman or like Morgan Stanley or whatever. And we were their customers and they had literally no competitive advantage other than entertaining people. And they lost the money if they didn't spend 10% of their budget. So like, quarterly, people would just be like, yo, like, can you like go skiing this weekend? Or like, can we just like, can we go to Vegas? Like we just got to go spend some money somewhere, So there's one of these weekends where one of the guys is like, dude, I got to like spend some dough. Like, are you free? Can you be at the helipad tomorrow at 9 a.m.? And I was like, yeah, I can be there. So I get there and it's like, me and like 4 other dudes that like have my job. We get in this chopper from the downtown heliport. They fly us to this racetrack in Jersey, and they've just got like Ferraris, Lamborghinis, like Astons, Porsches, Beamer, like every dream car you could ever imagine. And they're just like, they got us each race car instructors. And it's just like, we're going to just rip these cars around this racetrack all day and we're going to teach you how to do it. And then flew us back. Like that to me is like such a, vivid and representative memory of like it was just such a weird thing. It's like, man, we just like, it's these guys who realize that the only way they're going to get trades from you is by creating these crazy experiences and having you remember them and having to spend an unbelievable amount of money in like, the next 24 hours. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. It was an interesting time. They're not doing that anymore. They're not, the guys who had my job now, they're not even allowed to go out to dinner with these brokers anymore, let alone all of the shenanigans that were happening. Like they can't even accept a dinner. If they go, they have to pay for themselves.
Yeah. Definitely times have changed since then, but no, that's pretty cool. Well, cool. Awesome. So let's pivot a little bit into, just so the audience has some background. So David and I have been using retention. We've been testing retention.com software in our own businesses for several months now, and it's working really well. So Adam, can you dig into a little bit? You touched on it a little bit earlier about kind of what retention does. Kind of one of the main features is capturing emails from anonymous traffic. Can you speak maybe at a high level, like how does that work? Is it legal? Touch a little bit on that.
So yes, so we've been doing a bunch of stuff that we haven't even been talking about because it wasn't relevant. That's now a little bit more relevant now, but like just the get emails part of it, right? The first tool, the thing that you guys are using. The idea is that there are, so in order to serve ads in the ad tech world, there are a bunch of publisher networks that enable that. And they basically, through authentication events, people logging in, people clicking in emails, they're able to either cookie people's browsers or match browser characteristics with a hashed email, which a hashed email is an email address that has been encrypted in a way that a human being cannot unencrypt it. MD5 is a hashing language. SHA-256 is a hashing language. So several of these publisher cookie pools, if you want to call them that, there's one use case is to serve banner ads. Other people are involved for different reasons. So we've aggregated a bunch of these networks that allow us to basically give our customer a pixel that has all of the pixels of all of these different networks that we're involved in it. So that when someone comes to your website, if they see that cookie, we can see if there's one of these hashed email addresses in it. If there is, then you're like, okay, that's great, but a human being can't unhash it. Well, the way one would unhash it if one wanted to is one would go around and accumulate all of the email addresses in America and just hash all them in the same language. Because at that point, it's just a VLOOKUP. So this is not in the spirit of what they were trying to accomplish with this anonymous ad network. But this is what we're enabling. And it really works, as you guys know. So,
yeah.
So that is the essence of the first product. It's like we're taking this cookie pool, aggregating these cookie pools. We're basically sending signals and we're de-anonymizing this anonymous information. And then the last step, the reason it really works, I'm an email guy. I owned an email marketing company before. Deliverability, the art and science of getting a piece of marketing email into the inbox. It is tricky. It's everything. We figured out that if we buy a bunch of open and click signals from the broader email ecosystem And we make sure before we give our customer an email address that they've opened and clicked in like the last 7 to 14 days, depending on what the other characteristics of the email address are. That really works for deliverability because that person was on your website and they're opening and clicking other stuff. So that means they're not a spam trap. They're not a dead address, those two things are like what gets you in trouble in email. If you start sending to spam traps, essentially, and bad, old, unengaged emails. So that's product number one. And it's beautifully provocative to speak about. It's just so great. It's a whole topic of conversation in itself on podcasts like this because of the questions that you just asked. How is it legal? How can you do something like that? It's just, you can talk for days about it. So the reason that it's legal is because the Can-Spam Act of 2003 in the US. So you cannot do this in Europe, but our IPs are ring fenced. Every email we have is tied to a US postal address. We feel pretty good about the fact that 99.99% of these emails that we're going to give you are from the US. So can't do it in Europe, can't do it in Canada. In the US, Can-Spam of 2003 is actually opt-out, which I spoke a lot about in the beginning of the podcast. The world would lead you to believe that email in the US is an opt-in sport. I certainly believed that. And I owned an ESP. I literally was operating as a business owner in the market. And I had a total misunderstanding of the legislation until an attorney sat me down and said, this is actually what the law says. Wow. It says, so long as you have an opt out. So then it begs the question, why aren't we all spamming each other all the time? Because what matters in email is not whether you got an opt in or not at the end of the day. What matters is the engagement of your send. That is what Gmail cares about. That is what Yahoo cares about. That is what AOL cares about. That is what Yahoo. If you have a high open, high click, low unsubscribe, low complaint email stream, it does not matter if those people opt in or not. It would be way better for you to send more to that if the people didn't opt in than to send to an opt-in list that was the opposite of that, if that makes sense. Way better.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay. So thanks for covering that at a high level and how that works for everybody non-email. We've been testing the product. We're seeing, you spoke to a little bit about kind of some of the stuff your team's doing on the back end there's one thing that's to capture an email and then it's to use it effectively. And so, we're seeing open rates of around above 60% on the emails that we're capturing through retention. And so it's pretty incredible. And especially if it's kind of your, like the first product that you release. I'm excited to see what you and your team are working on and kind of gonna follow up with that. So yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the Firing the Man podcast. Be sure to stay tuned for part 2 of our interview with Adam Robinson that airs next week. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to today's Firing the Man podcast. If you like this episode, head on over to firingtheman.com and check out our resource library for exclusive Firing the Man discounts on popular e-commerce subscription services. That is firingtheman.com/resource. You can also find a comprehensive library of over 50 books that Ken and I have read in the last few years that have made a meaningful impact on our business. For that, head on over to www.firingtheman.com/library. Lastly, check us out on social media at Firing the Man and on YouTube at Firing the Man for exclusive content. This is David Schomer.
And Ken Wilson.
We're out. Before you go, we wanted to share a new service that Ken and I have been using called Getita that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida.com, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you?